So you also talk about the social compact with employees. That's a fundamental term you have used before, the social compact.
Right.
How it's being worked out with your employees. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I grew up on the east side of Detroit in a, what today would be considered a relatively poor family. We didn't know that one back then.
Yeah.
We thought we were great. Sort of like Woebegone, we're all smarter and brighter and handsomer.
Yeah.
We didn't have insurance half the time because my dad was a pattern maker in the auto industry. And so 6 months out of the year he didn't work, and so we didn't have health insurance. But my mother worked for a pediatrician's office, and so she was the health insurance system. She came home with the vaccines in her pocket and would chase us down the street and give us our shots. And we got treated, pro bono by the pediatrician's office that she worked for. And there were 6 of us within 7 years, so we were, a typical Italian-Irish family. And as I grew up, my expectations were to do a little bit better than my dad did. And in 1979, after flunking out of college the second time, I went to work in the plants, putting together rear axles at Ford Motor Company Sterling Gear and Axle plant, and actually went back to school, and I got frustrated with my union steward and said, I can do my job better than that. How do I get your job? And I ended up getting an MBA, and here I am running a big company. So where I came from was, with a stark realization of that way of life.
Right.
And so when I got to a level in the organization where I was actually in charge, it was, okay, well, here's my agenda. I want to do all these sorts of cool things. And I have people around me that make sure that I don't go too far too fast. And so we introduced yoga. And then, about 2 years into my tenure, I started talking about, geez, this middle class problem is really a big problem. 2008 happened. Income inequality is a major driver of the political dialogue right now. I gave everybody a copy of Thomas Piketty's book for Christmas in 2011, saying, here, read this. And finally I said, what do we need to do to, who are the people? And I travel around and I visit everybody in their cubicle, and I was hearing about how hard it was for people to make ends meet. And so I said to the human resources team, will you tell me who are these people? Who are our lowest paid people in the organization? What are their lives like? What are their families like? And that was a major ask. We didn't know. And it took us too long, from my perspective, to get that information. But when we got it, we found that we had, largely single mothers working in our call and claim centers, who had a large percentage of their children on Medicaid and a significant portion of their families on food stamps. And they were working for an insurance company. So I said to the team, what do we need to do to fix this problem? That shouldn't be that way. And is there a way for us to structure better compensation for them? And, they were averaging about $12.50, $13 an hour. Some as low as $12 an hour. That was our lowest wage. And I said, what would be a fair wage? Well, maybe 13 and a quarter. I said, no, that just doesn't feel like it's enough. Why don't and we argue back and forth, and of course the spreadsheet rules everything. And I said, $16. Let's look at $16. And what we found out at $16 is that people started losing benefits because they're getting paid more, and they were going into higher tax brackets. So we started looking at, what can we do to improve their personal disposable income? And so that was a benefits question. And so we said, for certain levels of the federal poverty level, 300% and under, what can we do to eliminate cost sharing in exchange for their engagement? And that's why we call it a social compact. I want to call it a social contract, but the lawyers inside the organization wouldn't let me use that word.
Yeah.
So it made a social compact, which, I guess
goes back to the Pilgrims.
More detente and Russian and that sort of thing. And we looked at it and said, what could we do to eliminate their cost sharing at certain levels of the federal poverty level in exchange for their agreement to engage in disease management programs? And so we'll take care of you if you take care of yourself. And so we've been on that journey for the last year and a half. It's still too early to tell. Our engagement scores are way up. Our turnover's way down. I get a lot of hugs in the hall. So all of that works. But until we get through some time here, but it'll cost us about $27 million by the time we're done for the Yetna employees. When we finish the Humana acquisition, there's another 10,000 employees that will be impacted.
Okay.
And so the number will jump to $78 million a year for us to make that investment. But I think it's a worthy investment, and we'll see. But we had to get beyond what's truth to a very important question of what do we need to believe in order for us to take this risk.
And you're willing to take that risk, step out on it, and say, this is what we believe. We believe it's important that people have this ability to have a living wage, if you will.
And to participate in success.
Yeah.
I mean, here we were, record stock price, record revenue, record earnings, executives getting paid a fortune on their stock option gains,
Right.
and we had people on food stamps and Medicaid.
Right.
What's
Yeah.
wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
And I think that was, it just wasn't fair. And
Yeah.
so, when things aren't fair, you don't necessarily need to have perfect information to make a decision.
Right, right. Well, that'll be very interesting to see how that shapes up over time. I'd like to come back in 2 years and see what you've learned there. That'll be really
Yeah, it'll be
fascinating.
interesting. Yep.